Top 3 Scariest Classroom Horror Stories You Won't Believe. Story 1. The Silent Student. There was a new student in Mrs. Darnell's class, one that no one could remember arriving. He just appeared. His name was always the same, no matter how many times they checked the roll call. A boy about 12 years old with jet black hair and pale skin. No one ever saw him smile, nor did anyone see him speak, yet he always knew the answers to questions the teacher hadn't even asked aloud. The class was intrigued at first, wondering why no one else seemed to notice anything odd about him. But then things took a darker turn. One day Mrs. Darnell found a note on her desk. It was scrawled in what looked like blood, though the teacher couldn't remember the exact moment she had picked it up. "I'm still here. I never left." She felt a chill crawl up her spine, her hands shaking as she dropped the note. But when she looked up, the boy, the silent student, was gone. No one had seen him leave. No one remembered seeing him in the hallway, the restroom, or anywhere outside the classroom. Days passed, but Mrs. Darnell couldn't shake the feeling that the boy was still present in the room, even though she hadn't seen him again. Every time she turned her back, her students would swear they felt his cold presence behind them, and there was always an inexplicable draft running through the class. Then, on a seemingly normal afternoon, the bell rang for the last period of the day. The students packed their bags, but when they looked up, they saw the boy standing at the back of the class. His eyes were hollow, black pits staring at them, empty of all emotion. As Mrs. Darnell went to call the principal, she heard the boy's voice for the first time. "I never left. You've all been here with me, forever." The lights flickered, and the classroom was plunged into darkness. The next day there was no sign of the class or the teacher. Only the empty classroom, eerily still, with the desk at the back, unmarked and untouched. And if you listen carefully, you might just hear the whispers of children long forgotten. Story 2. The Reflection in the Window. There's a particular classroom at the old Milford High School where strange things happen. It's in the back corner of the building, just far enough from the main hall to feel isolated. That room? Room 217. No one ever stays in there for long. The students who are unlucky enough to be assigned to it often feel the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. But it wasn't until Rachel's class that anyone knew exactly what was wrong with the room. Rachel was a new student at Milford and was assigned to room 217 on her first day. Her classmates, quiet and unnerved, avoided her gaze as she took her seat. But as she sat down, she saw it, a faint outline of a figure in the reflection of the window. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. But the figure in the window was moving, slowly, silently, its face obscured by shadows. Rachel asked the teacher about it, but the teacher gave her an unsettling smile and simply said, "That's just the shadow of the past." That night, Rachel stayed after school to study, hoping the quiet would help her focus. But as the room grew darker, she saw it again. Only this time, the reflection was clearer. The figure was staring at her. Its eyes gleamed with malevolent intent. Terrified, Rachel tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The figure in the window moved closer. Rachel backed away, her heartbeat pounding in her chest as the figure raised its hand to the glass. It was as if it were trying to reach her. It was then she saw the final detail. The figure's face was not human, but a twisted, rotting mockery of it, skin stretched too thin, eyes too wide. Its mouth opened in a silent scream. The window began to fog up, and as the figure pressed its face to the glass, Rachel heard its voice. "You've been chosen. Welcome to your forever." When the janitor found Rachel the next morning, she was gone. But the figure? It was still in the window, staring at anyone who dared to look. Story 3. The Teacher Who Never Left. The third story is one that still sends chills down the spines of anyone who hears it. It's about a teacher, Mr. Finn, who was beloved by the students at Crestwood Academy. He was kind, gentle, and had a way of making the hardest subjects seem easy. But Mr. Finn had a secret. Years ago, on a cold winter night, he disappeared. No one ever figured out where he went or what happened to him. There was a police investigation, but it led nowhere. His disappearance was chalked up to an unfortunate accident. But the students of Crestwood knew the truth. You see, after his disappearance, strange things began happening in his classroom. New students reported hearing his voice late at night, whispers that came from nowhere. Some students said they could feel his cold touch on their shoulders when no one else was there. Others saw his shadow moving across the room when the lights were off. But the most disturbing part? No one could ever stay in his classroom for long. Every time someone walked into room 305, they felt watched, like the eyes of the class were on them. One day, a group of brave students decided to stay in room 305 overnight, hoping to uncover the truth. As the clock ticked past midnight, the room grew colder. The whispers started again, but this time they were more distinct. They could hear Mr. Finn's voice, low and eerie. "I'm still here. Come find me." Suddenly the door slammed shut. The students screamed, but their cries were muffled, drowned out by the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching. The students turned to face the blackboard, where Mr. Finn's handwriting had started to appear, scratched deeply into the surface, as if etched by invisible hands. "I'm still teaching. You're still my class." The lights flickered, and when they finally turned back on, the students were gone. But Mr. Finn's name was still written on the chalkboard, just under the words, "You'll never leave me either." If you're still watching this, you've heard the stories. The terrifying classroom horrors that will never let you go. But here's the thing, you're not alone. You've listened, and now, just like those who came before you, you're part of the curse. Subscribe now or risk becoming a part of the next story. Because once you hear these stories, you can never unhear them.